Today you are going to learn how to make a worm house, a little worm home. It is actually pretty gross. In 2020, during the pandemic, I stayed with Mari in Piedade for a while, in a small house, and she bought a worm resort. It was a set of 3 black boxes that came with a handful of worms and some instructions on how to raise them and turn it into a worm farm. It is a really cool idea because you can turn some of your organic waste, the food scraps you would throw away, into humus, into fertilizer for plants. It worked so well and we liked it so much that later we bought another worm house. Several of our friends set up their own worm houses, and today I have more than 5 years of experience with worm bins. The only problem with all this is that buying a ready-made worm house ends up being kind of expensive. It can cost a few hundred reais. So we did a lot of research and found out that yes, you can make one at home, practically at zero cost. And that is what we are going to teach you today. This project is part of a series of videos we are making for our website. Manual Maker is a website where we post all the instructions for our projects. We have already taught how to make a folding table, a hanger using recycled plastic, and a vertical garden. This site is a really cool space, not only for us from Manual do Mundo to share our projects, but also for you to post yours and share them with other people. You do not pay anything. The goal is to build a supportive community. These initial special projects are sponsored by Petrobras and the federal government. Petrobras promotes critical thinking and innovation, which is why they support us. Because innovating, testing new projects, creating possibilities and new solutions is the key to technological development. So what do we need to make this worm resort here? We found out that we could replace those plastic boxes with these plastic buckets that are used for pretty much everything nowadays. They come from food, paint, pool chlorine. The important thing is that before you use them for the worms, you wash them really well. You will notice that worms are very picky creatures. If there is a small problem, they leave and you lose the worm bin. We found this bucket in the construction site dumpster next door. They had thrown it out. It was used to mix cement and things like that, but we have already cleaned it really well. It is not a problem if there is a little bit left inside because it is construction cement. It has a normal smell. The Minocasa worm house requires 3 compartments, so you will need 3 identical buckets. And they need to have lids because they stack one on top of the other. This type of bucket, if it does not have a lid, will sink down. And then it will not work. So the first thing I'm going to do here is attach these lids to the bucket that sits on top of them. I need to attach this lid to this bucket and this lid to this bucket. It is pretty simple. With the lid already under the bucket, I make a hole and fasten it with a screw and a nut, also using 2 washers to give it a bit more strength. Next, I make another hole and repeat the process. Now the lid is secured under the bucket. What is the purpose of attaching the lid to the bottom of the other bucket? I could leave it loose, The problem is that I am going to drill holes in the bottom of these buckets and the worms need to be able to pass through here. If I make a bunch of holes and just fit it on, the holes will end up misaligned as I use the worm bin and the worms will not be able to pass through anymore. So in the end, these screws are really just there to align the holes I am about to make. I am going to use a 4mm drill bit and make about 30 or 40 holes in the lids that I screwed on. The worms now have a clear passage, but I still need to drill the lid that covers everything. On this one, I have to make smaller holes. This is the worm's air vent, so the holes have to be smaller. I am using a 2.5mm drill bit here because I do not want them to escape through this lid. The ideal is to just let a little fresh air in. The next step is to install one of these little filter faucets down here, okay? This bottom part will fill with leachate, so I will install the faucet as low as I can. Yes, leachate. I will explain it in a moment. I need to use this step drill bit, which has multiple diameters, to make the hole. You just have to be careful not to make the hole too big. After installing the little faucet, I tested with water to check for leaks. In this case, it is leaking. I realized it is because the faucet thread ends here. It does not take into account that we might install it in a bucket instead of a filter, so I'm going to add an extra rubber washer. And now, yes, it is not leaking at all. My worm house is pretty much ready, but we have a problem here. These buckets are white and the plastic is thin, so they end up being kind of see-through. They let light in, but worms dislike light and always want to hide instead of being exposed. There is no other option. We have to paint them black. These buckets were already sanded. If I do not sand them, the paint will not stick. On plastic, the paint slips off and peels. I am only going to paint the outside. There's no need to paint the inside, especially because this paint could irritate the worms. That would not be good. We are going to wrap the faucet really well. I wanted to install it first because I did not want the rubber washer to sit on top of the paint. I am also going to take the opportunity to put some labels here with the name of each compartment. The worm house is ready. Now we will finally understand how the worms live in here and how we can raise them. This top compartment here, which I labeled young ones, is where you will begin the breeding. This is where we place the worms' food at the start. And what do worms eat? They eat very sweet fruits, so we have already separated some here. Look, banana peel. I am going to place it down here in the corner. Papaya peel. Some spoiled watermelon rind and some other fruit scraps too. Let us toss everything in. These are things I already know worms really enjoy. But if you are going to try something new at home and you are not sure, just put it in one corner and see whether they get attracted to that food or not. But basically, you should not add any cooked food. There is no point in adding vegetables like potatoes or beets because they do not like those. You also cannot add acidic fruits like lemon, orange or pineapple. On the other hand, you can add coffee grounds, eggshells and cardboard. Yes, if you tear the cardboard into pieces and place it inside, it will decompose. There cannot be any bits of plastic nor too much ink, but in general, cardboard breaks down well here inside the worm bin. And as you may have guessed, the worms will not simply appear here on their own. We need to add some worms so they can start the colony and begin to reproduce. I brought my oldest worm bin here. Oko, it is the veteran of them all. Let us see how the young ones are doing in this compartment, in this older worm bin. All right, let me set this aside. Let us remove the tray. Here, you can see that they have already broken down the material quite a lot. From the banana peel, only the stem is left. We cannot even tell what was tossed in here anymore. There is a mango pit, but where are the worms? Look at that, Mom. It is full of worms here.
But Ibere, are you handling this with your bare hands, without any protection?
Well, first of all, the food that was added here was placed by me, so I know exactly what is in this bin. It is only sweet fruit, as there is absolutely no problem. And second, it does not smell like anything. This is not rotten, okay? Did the worm eat it? It barely smells like anything. Seriously, it smells like I cannot smell anything. And third, worms are completely harmless animals. They do not bite and they do not have any toxins. There is no danger at all. We can handle this easily. I know what this material is. And worms are harmless, so let us colonize our new worm bin with this handful of worms from the old one. The last thing I am going to add, which is very important, is a bit of sawdust. We have some sawdust stored here from Manual do Mundo. I will sprinkle a handful on top of the worms. The sawdust is important because it absorbs moisture. If I do not add it and only put in the fruit, this could turn into a mush. These fruits have a lot of water. So it would turn into a kind of goo at the bottom. Then it might start to smell bad. All right, so what is going to happen now? The worms are going to start eating all that fruit, and that whole volume you saw is going to shrink. It is going to disappear. I am not sure, but all that fruit is going to reduce to just a few inches at the bottom. Since the worms will eat and poop, we will use their waste as fertilizer for the plants. This humus will keep accumulating until the bucket reaches the top. What do you need to do then? Switch it with the one at the bottom. Move it down here. And then that label no longer applies, right? Because the one at the bottom becomes the veteran, the oldest worm compartment. And up here, you will start a new colony. You will start adding fruit again. Take a small portion of the worms from the bottom and place them on top. Then they begin a new colony in this compartment. In the section with the oldest worms, there will still be some critters. They will keep eating whatever is left, whatever is still tasty and usable. When they get tired, they move upward, while others from above migrate downward. There's no problem at all with this flow of worms between the two levels. That's actually why I made the holes. Not only for that, something else is going to happen too. As the fruit decomposes, it releases liquid, leachate, and this liquid drips through these two compartments and starts to accumulate down here. If everything goes well, the leachate won't smell bad, it won't have any odor. It'll just be a brownish liquid, kind of like made tea. And the cool thing is that it's full of nutrients for the plants. So when you're going to water a plant, you can add a little bit of leachate to the water and use that mix. The usual recommendation is a 1:5 ratio, 1 part leachate to 5 parts water. I'll admit that at home, sometimes I mix it half and half. It never killed any plant. Let's take a look at this stage in the worm bin at my place. So this is the veteran bin, the one that's already full, and we've moved it to the bottom. Let's dig around so you can see. We overdid it a bit with the eggshells. Ideally, you should grind them before adding, but let's move on. There are hardly any worms left. They've eaten everything. Now it's mostly humus with just a few tiny worms. Janssen is asking behind the camera if there are worms in this humus. Is it a problem to put it on plants? Actually, worms are very beneficial for plants. Having worms is great. It's not a problem at all. Finally, let's check the leachate down there. Wow, it's full, completely full. Look, just the color I mentioned, a light brown. There are 2 bricks here. We leave this brick so that if any worm falls, it can climb back into the upper box. This brick almost touches the upper bin so the worm can climb back up safely.
If it falls into the leachate with nothing to grab onto, it will drown, leaving dead worms inside the liquid. That's bad.
This liquid also doesn't smell like anything, so it's very easy to use. It's not the same as landfill leachate, which is contaminated and dangerous. Nothing like that. This one is totally safe. By the way, at the end of the video, we could put this in our garden. I'll set everything up again here. I only use these labels to explain what happens in the beginning. Because the top part will fill, then you'll move it down, and this one will go up. You'll raise the worms until both buckets are completely full. Then the older one will be ready to use on the plants. What happens next? Once you spread it on the plants, that compartment becomes empty again. Then you lower this one and bring the empty one up, and that is how the cycle continues. The leachate has the advantage of being collected very quickly. In about a month, it will start coming out. You can already use the liquid here, but the humus takes much longer. I estimate that filling a container like this takes around 4 or 5 months. But the most important part is that you would normally throw away banana peels, apples, pears, watermelon, papaya, and avocado. Now all of that will become fertilizer for your plants. Ideally, place the worm house somewhere it will not get rained on, because if rainwater gets inside, the worms will drown. That would ruin the whole process. You could put a tile or something similar on top to protect it, but ideally it should not get any sun either. The sun will heat their home to unbearable temperatures, making them try to escape. Danny, here next to me, asked how often we need to feed the worms. You can add food every single day with no problem, but they also will not die if you leave them without food for a while. Like if you travel for a month and only come back later, the worms will still be alive because they have plenty to eat and are very efficient. If you take good care of it and everything goes well, this will be full of worms. You can grab a big handful like this. It is honestly pretty disgusting. Another thing you will notice is that when there are too many worms, they do not grow. This overpopulation keeps them small. As far as I can tell, there is no problem with that because they still do their job, eating the fruit we put in. There is something I forgot to mention, which people are also asking here. Johnson and Daniel are answering everything. No soil was added. Worms do not need soil to live. The soil forming here is humus, the fertilizer we will use. I have never added soil to it. I tried adding soil before and it just turned into mud. Do not use soil. This brown stuff you're seeing here, this little bit of mud, is the humus. It is the fertilizer you are going to use. It is worm poop. Now here is the thing. I am going to leave this here for a few weeks. We will come back later to see if they ate it or not. I want to show you some results in this video to show how the process works. We cannot leave this to fill up, move it down and switch it because that takes almost a year. But at least we will be able to see the difference in that watermelon and the banana peels we put in there. That is it. Oh, what do we have here? First, let's check the leachate down there. Look, it produced quite a lot of leachate. And here you can see a mistake we made. Look, in this middle bucket, no sawdust was added. There was nothing for the worms to settle on. So the worms from above fell down here and died. And now we have the smell of dead worms. Also in the leachate, since we didn't add the brick there. Our mistake, right? We should have placed a brick here or something similar. The worms would have been fine if they fell, as long as there was sawdust and fruit. But in this bucket, theoretically, everything should be okay. There was something Danny had to fix. He had to add more holes in the lid because I had made too few. It began to smell because it didn't get enough air. And I also drilled too few holes in the bottom, so he added more. Maybe that's why the worms migrated downward into the other layer. But look inside here. This is great. Look, that watermelon completely disappeared. Let's stir this up to check for live worms. You can see that they're already consuming all the material that was there. And if we check in the corner, look, it's full of tiny worms. We made the mistake of adding too much fruit at once for the worm. Ideally, we should have made a bedding of sawdust and then added only a few pieces of fruit. So they could start developing, and once they were stronger, we could add a bit more fruit. This type of more vertical worm bin has one disadvantage. You can't add too much at once because you can't spread it out. So it doesn't get enough air. You have to add things little by little so you don't create a pile that will rot and smell bad. Overall, it's a success. What we added decomposed, produced leachate, and the worms are alive and reproducing. I washed the bottom buckets and will place a brick in one so worms can climb out of the leachate. This way we can rescue the worms and return them. But there's one more thing. I'm going to put some tool here to keep the worms from falling in. At least the bigger ones won't fall through. In the middle one, I'll add a small bedding of sawdust and then the worms will spread over the top. An overripe mango here, let's add it as food for the little creatures and come back in 15 days to see whether we have good news or not. You can't see anything just by opening it like this. We didn't overdo it with food this time, did we? The little creatures here. Look, a live tiny worm exactly like the ones we've kept in the worm bin for over 5 years. It worked. Let's check underneath to see if any worms fell through. Now we have this sawdust here for protection, but there aren't any worms down here. Here it is. Not much leachate has accumulated since we added only a little fruit, but there are no more dead worms. If a worm falls onto this net, it can climb back up. After more than a month working on this, I think we finally have a worm house for Manuel do Mundo. Soon we'll be able to add fertilizer to our vertical garden, the one we taught you to make at the beginning of our 8-video series here on Manual Maker. This one looks great, huh? We haven't harvested the lettuce yet. Hey worms, let's get to work. The lettuce needs you, okay? But the others have already grown a lot. The tomato plant is already pretty tall. By the way,